Hello and welcome to PASS Virtual Summit 2020. My name is Tom Norman and I'm here to present to you today Database Projects Make Deployments Consistent. This particular session is in combination and in the learning pathway for DevOps. So please check out all the other DevOps sessions and to learn more and hopefully to set up your database in a DevOps fashion. My name is Tom Norman, as stated. I am a database architect and I am with KPA. You can see my LinkedIn and also my Twitter handle. And also I was the 2018 KPA Employee of the Year. Got to go to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And also I am the PASS Virtualization Group Leader. So I would love to have you over there in any of our sessions that we do have. So PASS has a lot to offer you. I've been a member of the organization for many, many years, and it's really helped my career, and I encourage you to get involved. I encourage you to go to your local groups, to SQL Saturdays, to PASS Marathons, virtual groups, and new to the organization is this PASS Pro membership. So go to pass.org and check out the information and then go look for all the free resources out there. There's tons and tons of free training that we give you every single year. So what's our agenda today? Our agenda today is deployment objectives. We want to make sure and deploy the most solid database code that we can deploy so that is effectively released and without error, and also to make sure that our websites and apps run very well. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we want to deploy scripts to any environment. So as we're moving along, you know they start out in dev and then they get moved to QA and into user acceptance testing, UAT, and then into prod. So, but we want to make sure when we're deploying the objects within the database that that script can be deployed anywhere. And we want that one single script to be deployed to any environment. And we don't want a different script per environment. And you're asking, well, why, Tom? Why do we not want a script to be in a different script for each environment? And I'll tell you is because then you don't get your QA people involved in what's going to hit production, and you don't have to get your user acceptance group hitting the same code that's going to hit production. So it's very important that basically you make sure that the script is exactly the same. And if there's a variance, I'll show you how we make those slight variances. Then we also want to deploy only things that have been changed. We don't want to go change every stored procedure or table or view or whatever. We only want to change it if it's actually been changed and is meant for deployment on this particular feature release. The other thing is that a script must be able to be run multiple times. And you're like, going again, well, Tom, why do we have to make it run multiple times? Well, if you're going to deploy the same script in prod, QA, UAT, dev, wherever the case may be, how many times will it run in QA? Multiple times. And that's why we all make our scripts run multiple times. And I'll share with you exactly how we do that also. And then all database objects should have a script. And we'll talk about that a little bit further in depth in just a few moments. But the first thing is source control. Source control is going to be your golden copy. It's not your production. It's not what is in your production. Now, it may be initially what's in your production because maybe you have nothing in source control today. But source control is your friend. Source control will allow you to, number one, is if you're editing a really long stored procedure and you just want to start over again, you can go back to history and get the previous version in source control and start afresh. You can also see who changed that last stored procedure so that if there's a problem or you're troubleshooting something within production, you can always go back to that person and you can find out, what they were thinking and why they coded it the way that they coded it. Okay. And then, of course, you're able to make your corrections and check them in. And then you have technically what will end up in production in a future release, hopefully not too far down the road. So just like other software files, all database objects should be checked in and out. And I just gave you several reasons why we should check them in and out. Another reason to check them in and out would be basically to be able to do code reviews. How great would it be that when you're checking in an object, a database object, that you could have a peer look at that database, that script that you're writing, review it and say, yep, that matches the requirements I got, or no, those are not the requirements. That's not what I think the requirements are. And then we both go back to the person that wrote the requirements and turn around and say, is this what you meant? And we can get it better. We can get it to where it's stronger and that it delivers what the business is asking us to deliver. So in addition to those type of scripts, which mainly would be in user database bases, your product databases, you would also have scripts within master and MSDB. Now, with 2019, they did bring out a new item to where we can put master and MSDB in availability groups. And one of the main gotchas pre-2019 is that when you are going from primary replica to secondary replica, or multiple secondary replicas, is your objects within master and MSDB, your logins, your jobs, your policy-based management, your auditing files, credentials, anything that is actually in master and MSDB, that's going to be a problem for you, and you're going to have to deploy it when you have an availability group. You're going to have to deploy it not only to the primary replica, but you're also going to have to deploy it to the secondary replica. And so we actually script and put into source control all of our logins, jobs, all those items I mentioned, and of course much more that is stored in MSDB. So I want to encourage you to basically store those things, but you're going to turn around and tell me, but wait a minute, Tom, just go to dbatools.io and they'll have all that stuff to help you bring that in. And the answer to that is yes, they do. But can they turn around and show you basically who made that change and why they particularly made it? And no, they can't. They're just basically just copying the files from one server to another, which normally meets what we're looking, what a company may be looking for. So depending on your business needs, I highly recommend it. Not sure how you want to approach it, but you can approach it the way you so choose. So let's talk about the repeatable deployments we talked about a while ago. So every database object, no matter what it is, an update script, a insert script, a change table script, whatever it very well may be, is you want to make sure that basically you can execute that script multiple times. And a lot of times you're going to do that via where clauses, if not exist, checking to see if you've already done the inserts, just any way that you can think that you basically can say, okay, I need to run this multiple times, so how can I do it? And I haven't run across any objects yet that I've not been able to go in and run multiple times. And when I say run multiple times, for example, a login in master, if you say create login, whatever, if you run it again, you're going to error out. So all you basically do is say, if the login does not exist, then go ahead and create the login. Else you're basically just going to skip it. So that's one example how you would turn around and make your script be able to run multiple times. But one of the things that really gets us as DBAs is security. You're like going, man, security is hard because we all know, at least I hope we know, that basically the security that's in your dev environment is not the same security that's in your prod, nor in your QA, nor in your UAT. They're all different. But do you know in reality, security is not different between all those environments. It should be all the same. The difference is who is assigned to do those things. So how do you do that? Well, there's an item called database role. And what you do with a database role is you assign all the security, say for a microservice or whatever the case may be, you assign all the security for that account to that database role. What's changing between the environments is the account that is assigned to that database role. So you would have, so when I go have a new security item that I need to secure or a new feature I need to secure, and we're going to go add a new account to do it, I will add not only QA, but I'll also add one for dev, and I'll also add one for UAT. So I'll add an account and prod. I'll add it all the way through. The only difference is when I'm deploying that security out, I am basically just changing who's in that database role that has that security. So the security technically is exactly the same all the way across. The only difference is which account, which should be pretty much the same, but which account basically is assigned to it in which environment. So to help you out though, there's these two blog posts. And these two blog posts, by the way, one of them has a PowerShell script that will help you script exactly what I said to you on how to go and do database security between environments. This is not an easy thing to do, but we're going to look quite heavily at a demo of how it's done, and we'll show it to you here shortly in the demos. So the next thing is circular reference. Now, for most of us database people, we've never heard of circular reference. We're like going, what is circular reference? And I've never run across it in all my years of writing code within SSMS or for the little bit of code I've written in Azure Data Studio. I've never run across circular reference, but in Visual Studio, you will. Okay, you will. If you're writing code that crosses databases. So do you have any stored procedures or views or anything like that that's going to cross databases? And if you have them crossing databases, then what you end up having is basically database A wants to change an object in database B, and database B wants to change an object in database A, and all of a sudden you've got this circular reference going on. And you're going to get this big red X on the screen. If you run into this, you'll get this big red X in the screen in front of you from SQL Server Data Tools, and you'll need to fix it. And this blog post is exactly how you fix it. You basically find the least common object between the two databases, and you pull it out by itself into a brand new database project, and we call it circular reference. Database A, database B, circular reference, and in our examples we had, I actually had to pull out one stored procedure and allow it to deploy that way. And this is mainly when you go in and create references to your databases between databases, when things are calling between databases and you have the database on the same server. Some people may not allow that, but that is very much allowed in the database world. So the next thing that we also want to make sure of, and I want to give you again the ability to get the template, is to create SQL agent jobs. And when you have SQL agent jobs, you turn around and basically you create them, and you can turn around and basically deploy them to different environments, or deploy them to all the environments and possibly just don't schedule them somewhere, or possibly even just deploy the jobs, and I'll show you how to deploy the jobs basically to only the environment you choose. So maybe that job is only on QA or UAT or one of those. So let's start looking at our database project, and let's see where we are, because we have a lot of information to go over for you there. So let's start the demos. So what I have here for you in this screen is basically we have here uh, a blank Visual Studio tablet here in front of us. And the one thing to note is that when we're looking at Visual Studio, you're like going, but man, Tom, Visual Studio costs a lot. And yes, it does. And you'll have to look at the licensing for your particular company. But if you're doing it at home or playing with it or whatever the case may be, you notice that the Community Edition will run this. And when you're installing it, you want to be sure and install it with the data tools and stuff, and it will install SQL Server data tools for you. So we will be using the Community Edition of 2019 today to do this. So when we're looking at things and looking at what's going on here, let's first of all look at our database and see what our database looks like, because most of us, our databases are already in play. We need to get our current existing databases into database project and into source control. So how do we do that? How do we get these objects into database projects so we can get them into source control? So let's go look at our database, and you'll notice in our database that we have three databases here. We got DB-admin, we got SQL Demo, and we've got SQL Demo Import. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back over here, and we're going to import in to us the databases into Database Project. So let's come up here and go File, New. We're going to go New Project. And when we're looking at the project, we're going to do a SQL Server Database Project. And when you're looking at a database project, just to be aware that a database project is really per database. It's not for all the databases, but it's per database. And that's why we were talking about circular reference a while ago might cause you trouble, because it is per database. So we're going to go ahead and come right here, and then we're going to uncheck this box so I can rename this. And what we're going to do is we're going to start out with the database DB-admin that we saw. And we're going to change our solution name. You can put the solution name whatever you want, but the solution is basically going to be a container of all your databases. So it very well may be, for example, a product that you've got several databases address this one product. So you might call your solution name the product, and then you'd have all your individual databases, for example. So let's go ahead and create that, and it's going to bring it up to us. Now we're going to go ahead and at this particular junction, I'm just going to only bring in one of them. But if I wanted to bring in the other two databases in there, all I would have to do is right click on this and say Add New Project, and it would allow me to bring in another database in there. Now notice that I also name the database exactly the same as the database name. Now you're going, but wait a minute, Tom, in some environments, I want them to basically not use the exact same name. The beauty of Database Project is that's your project name, but when you deploy that thing, you can call it whatever you want. Does not have to be a specific name. So just FYI, you can I would call the database project the name of the database, and then if you're deploying it with a different name, they'll deploy it that way later on. So let's go back and look at our database admin for a moment. And what you would do is you would right click and go down and look at properties here. And when you're looking at properties, one thing to first of all to note is look at all the different places that you can target this platform. Look at all the different areas you can go from 2005 all the way up to 2019, Azure SQL Data Managed Instance, Azure SQL DB, Data Warehouse, and you can go all the way back to 2005. So we're on 2019, so I'm going to target my 2019 server. This will create a DAC pack, and this DAC pack is where it bundles everything together and allows you to run this thing through a CI/CD pipeline, and that's basically going to be consistent integration, consistent deployment, and allows you to deploy things to a server or a computer. It doesn't matter. It can deploy to a dev computer all the way through to QA, to UAT, to production. You can have multiple QAs, multiple UATs, whatever the case you may want. Now, personally, I like to put, because we use schemas, I like to include schema names with my file name, so I'm going to choose that. I'm going to turn off validate casing, and the reason I turn off validate casing is because we're not real consistent on our camel case typing, upper lowercase typing. So let's look at what database settings we have. And this is one of the beauties of this guy is basically whatever you set in here, every database that gets deployed from this thing, from dev to production, has the exact same settings. That's huge, and you can control it right here. So if we go into operational and we go over here and look at you've got your file group. Maybe you don't want to put it on the same file group, some file stream. You got all kinds of settings here. You can turn around and change it to simple recovery mode or whatever the case may be. Now, one thing you do need to change, and I don't know why Database Project does this or Data Tools does this, but page verification, you don't want to leave it to none. Let's change it to checksum. You can turn on query store. You can do all kinds of things to where basically the settings are exactly the same in all environments. And that's what we do. We want to make sure all settings so that a developer cannot turn around and say, well, it works on my machine. Well, it's the exact same settings on your machine that it is in production. So I don't know what the problem is. So here again is just different settings you can set, containment level, especially if you go up into Azure. As you can see, several different things. We're going to turn off enable file settings because we don't necessarily need that. And hiding down here from us is we're just going to say OK. Now the other thing that we will create here is going to be a SQL CMD variable because we're going to know, we do want to know which environment we are going into. But I'm going to default this thing to always go into the development environment, the dev environment. So we're going to default to him and got him ready to go. And then at that point, we're almost there. We've got the properties, but you're like going, Tom, where's all my stored procedures and my tables and my views and etc.? Let's go get them. So if you right click on database DB admin, the database, and you say import, you can go from a data tier application, a database or script. So the very first time, yes, you're going to go pull it from production. You're going to turn around and say, you're going to select your setting. You're going to say connect. And then the other thing I like to do is pull in my permissions and my database settings. And then personally, I want my folder structure to be by object type. As you see, you can say none, so you can put all the scripts in the same folder. I wouldn't recommend it. Or you can do it by schema. You can do it by schema and object type, but I like ours by object type. So that's really personal preference. So let's go ahead and hit start. And there it goes, and it's going and getting all of our objects and everything. So it is finished already. This is, of course, not a very big database, but it still doesn't take a long time. And you'll notice that it brought in all kinds of objects here. Some security, some stored procedures, some tables. So it brought in a lot of different objects for us. Now, what we're going to do is I've got even more to show you. So we're going to go ahead and leave this, but you'll notice it says go add it to source control. So if I clicked add to source control, guess what? Everything I just brought in, that's all my scripts within off of my production server are now checked into source control. You can have it in source control that fast. So let's go ahead and go to one of the projects to where we have more information. I'm going to go ahead and close this particular solution. Not going to save it. And we're going to go ahead and open up the demo here. Now you'll notice here, and the admin here is basically the same DB admin. So if you wanted it to be the same name, you could come down here and you could turn around and rename it. And I could say DBA admin. And I could have it, and it tells me, do you want my target database to have the same name? And yes, I do. And basically now it's the same name, and you'll notice it's telling me to check in my solution, and it's got a little plus sign here to say that basically I need to go save it. Plus you got this little pencil down here that shows that I just changed 3 different files. Okay, so we have that. So we go back to our Solution Explorer, and you'll notice that I have 4 different databases here. I have master database, I have DB admin, SQL demo, and SQL imports. So let's go ahead and look at, for now, let's go ahead and look at our database here. And let's look at, you'll notice I've added right here to this one a new folder called scripts. And what I've got here in scripts, I've got post-deployment scripts, and then I've just got some tools. Now the tools may be just some queries that I run that I want to check into source control so I don't lose them. How many times have you ever had a script that basically you're like going, I don't know what I did with that? Well, this is a place that you can actually go put some scripts, and you can actually save them if you didn't want to actually put them in the database, because anything in the scripts folder is not going to be deployed automatically. So what I mean by that is when you create a script, let's just go create a brand new one. And let's just say new item here. And we're going to go create a new script, and you're like going, wow, look at all these templates we have. Man, I've got CLRs, I've got user scripts, some in build, some not in build. We'll talk about that in just a second. Here's stored procedures, data warehouse, synonyms, you name it, tables and views for you, foreign keys. And if you click on any of these, it'll give you a starting script. Security, all this security stuff, service broker, storage, service accounts, and more. So you've got a lot of templates here. So let's go ahead and go create a script that's not going to be in the build. And we're going to go ahead and name this. And we're going to go ahead and say add new tool. And we go say add new tool. It's going to start a blank script. There's nothing there for us. And you'll notice over here it has add new tool. Now, a while ago when I was telling you that we have the capability of going in here and basically adding things without it going into the build and being deployed, that's actually controlled over here in the build action. So with the build action being none, it's not going to be copied anywhere, and it's not going anywhere. So you can just use this kind of as also as a repository of any scripts that you might have that you want other people to have access to, your other teammates, and also so you have a central location where they are. And then as you change them, you can see what the history is in case you want to go figure out what happened to them. So with that, the other scripts that you have is if we go back and look at that, if you do want it to build automatically, you would actually go ahead and change this to a build methodology, and then it's going to compile. It's going to go check and make sure your table exists and the field exists and whatever else you're calling. It's going to make sure that everything exists, and most of your scripts are going to be in the build functionality. The main place you have build none is going to be in your scripts folder. It's where you're going to have build none. Now, let's take a look at some other things and start looking at. So we've already imported it in. So let's go look at some stored procedures. And I'm trying to remember, I don't have it here, but let's go ahead and look at our stored procedures. And let's just open up one of them. And you might recognize that script, SP Blitz. That just happens to be Mr. Ozar's scripts that I put into source control. But here's a script, and basically as you're looking at that script, you're looking at that basically it says create script name, and then basically here's where it's set in the environment we were talking about. And what we have with the environment is sometimes what we will do within a script, we'll turn around and say, if the environment equals out of this particular table, then go ahead and deploy it. Otherwise, just return and possibly get out. And let me show you that actually in the SQL Server window here. So let's come over to our window here. Let's go over to a new query window. And let's go select from our info table, select star from dbo.tb info. And I don't have anything there currently. But if I did normally in my production, I do, it's going to turn around and say the environment key, the info key is environment, and then also value. So let's go ahead and get something in there. And how are we going to do that? So let's go to our post-deployment script and pull that out. So let's get that. And let's populate that particular table. So give us a second here. Let's go to population scripts. Let's go to populate TB info. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this script, and then I'll show you how we're going to actually deploy it. This would be a manual deployment, not an automated deployment. But if we want to manually deploy this thing, you'll notice this thing actually has environment equals dev. So let's go ahead and go right click on our database. We can do a clean, basically just kind of cleans everything. Make sure that, if you had an error or whatever, it gets rid of your error. And then when you do the build, it's going to do those builds and make sure that everything is tied together and tables and stuff, everything that's in the build action. So let's go ahead and do a clean. And then we're going to go ahead and right click and do a build. And then once we do a build, we're going to go ahead and publish the database. And we're going to go ahead and tell it that we're going to go to the dbadmin database over on the server, and we're going to load the value of dev. Now you can also create a profile for all your values and stuff and settings you have, which we'll look at some of those in just a moment, that you can turn around and actually deploy your database. Now let's go ahead and publish, and let's see what we got here. So it's going to create the preview. We're going to give it a moment here. It should finish up for us. Shouldn't take too long here, hopefully. There it goes. Uh-oh. We got an error. Well, why did we get an error? So like we said, we can go and look at these different objects and stuff and see what's going on. It says database admin does not exist. Make sure the name is correct. Oh, I thought I went in and said publish. Let's go up here. You should be able to deploy it to a different name. And let's go ahead and just put in admin so it doesn't yell at me again. I'm sure you can deploy to a different name because we've done it. And then I'm going to go ahead and deploy again and publish. And there we go. Now, if I come over to, let's switch screens again and go over to Management Studio. And if I come over here and show you in Object Explorer, if I refresh, I now have the admin database. We'll pin that up there so we have that. And we're going to go ahead and now query that admin database instead of the DB admin. And voila, there's our environment. So we're able to use that and to our advantage to basically say, what environment are we in? And should I go ahead and make that change? Now let's go look at the populate script and kind of see what exactly happens when we do that. So let's switch back to the other screen and take a look at that. All right, so what we do is there's this one script, and this one script will basically tell us, okay, what's the name of the prod server, what's the name of the UAT server, QA server, a DBA server possibly, an obfuscation server. Development is by default the very last one. So this is the only script, and we only change this script when we add brand new servers, which is beautiful because then once we have that, we can go in and actually publish to the environments and say, if the environment equals prod, return, get out, don't do anything else, like for example with an obfuscation stored procedure. So that is kind of how we control the environments. So let's go back and look at the stored procedure though, because you're going, well Tom, here's another thing here. Let's go ahead. This is what the deployment script would look like when it's deploying for you. It's going to be showing you all the objects it's deploying or what it might go in and rebuild for you. But notice that the object basically says create. It does not say alter. So if I ran that again, you would think you would need to put alter in there. Well, first of all, always put in create. I've tried create or alter sometimes, and sometimes they'll take it and sometimes it won't. I'm not sure what all is going in there, but definitely create works. So always put in create, and even though you deploy it a second time, it actually knows that you've already deployed those objects. And so it's not going to go add another object to the database. So if we go back and look at our SQL Server and we look at the admin database here, we'll see that, for example, here's our tables, right? So we've got all of our tables and we've got our stored procedures down here. And what we want to do now is I want to go in and just alter and add, let's just say we go add a field to the TB info table. Let's just go add one field. So let's go see how we're going to actually do that. So coming back over to our project, let's come down to our tables and open up our table here, DB info. Now you can put the field wherever you want the field to be, and depending upon the deployment process, it will put the field in whatever order you want. So keep in mind that depending upon what you will do, it might rebuild the table on you. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to just come down here and add new field. And we'll just call it an mvarchar10. We'll let it do what it wants. You'll notice that it adds the script not only in the T-SQL side, but also the other one. So if I came down here and said new field 2, and we call it varchar 5 or 10 or whatever, and say not. We're not going to do not null because it's going to make us do a constraint, and I don't want to do a constraint right now. And you'll notice that popped up at the top that brought that field in. So let's go ahead and save this, and then let's go ahead and redeploy the database, and we'll deploy it again to the admin area. Now we don't necessarily need to do a build because it should build as we go and do our work there. So it's going to load everything through. It brings us up. Let's go up here to DB admin again. And we're going to go ahead and change our database name to admin. And this is where you would go change your database. And then we would load values into the table. Now, something to denote is by default, it will block any deployment if there's a data loss that might actually occur. So depending on what you're doing and you know what you're doing, then you might uncheck that particular box. You can also tell to drop things, drop permissions, not in source or whatever, but we don't necessarily drop. We basically leave the default as it is, basically saying that the indexes, for example, have to be in source, not necessarily just out there. And you can also check and say, don't drop my certificates or don't drop audits. There's a lot of different options here for you. Along with, as you look at it, there's also some things you can ignore and some things you can exclude. So you can check through there. Some of the things you might exclude, for example, would be your column encryption keys or something like that for always encrypted and those type of things, which, by the way, we run, and temporal tables we have also within our database projects. All right, so we're going to go ahead and publish. And we should be successful this time. We'll give it a second here. And it finished. Now you can you can come in here, I don't know whether you notice, but like when you're getting ready for a deployment to production and you're the nitpicky DBA like I am and you want to know what's going into production tonight, I want to know, you could go in here and you could go ahead and do publish, and you could tell it where to go again. We'll go to me again. Now it's not going to re-show us anything, but once we go load values, you can do a generate script, and you can look at the script and see exactly what's going to happen. So that is very important, very good for you, and allows you to do that and to see what has happened in your publishes. But anyway, you can, like I said, you can see everything that occurs to you and all the errors. You can read the errors and see what happens within there. So let's go look back and let's see if our fields got added to our tables. So if we go over here and query our table over here again, and you'll notice our two new fields are there. And you'll notice I didn't have to do an alter table, do this, it did it itself. Now if we go look at the output and everything that we had, you would see that it would have done an alter table, alter field. And depending upon the option, you can be anal and put the field right beside info value, but it would cause a table rebuild versus just leaving it at the end where you would do an alter table type of scenario. So as you've seen a table, you've seen a store procedure. You've noticed in the table, as we look at it, that basically it's also a create table. It's got your identities, your constraints, you can have triggers. If I had indexes, I would have indexes. If I come down here and look at it, I think I probably do have some indexes. Down here, you can see some foreign keys, check constraints, primary keys. So you can actually see all kinds of things going on here in this table. And here is basically always encrypted being set up for the table to run with always encrypted. Note, with always encrypted, database project, as of even this last week, does not like it when you change an always encrypted table that has a field that's always encrypted. Do it outside the alter statement, and then make sure you have it coded here, and then in the table declaration, and then your database project will start functioning properly. You get a report element error when you do that. So if you ever see that, that's one of the errors that you might get. So just kind of FYI for you, that is a great way to go see those things. So anyway, we also saw a while ago, we saw exactly how to go in and use our tables and create new tables and those type of things. So let's go ahead now to start looking at some other feature functionality. And I'm going to go into how we have our server set up, our security and stuff set up. So I'm going to show you how we did it. We'll go ahead and close this solution again, and we're going to open up this server solution. So we kind of like to have our security away from our developers and stuff, so everything. So you can see basically there's a lot of different databases here. And you'll notice I have model, MSDB, and master here. Now model, the only thing you would have there, of course, we all know model is the database that you go into. And with model, you actually, all your databases that you create after you have set your model settings will be exactly like model. So if you have any special settings that you want all the databases to have, for example, not saying to do this, but for example, if you want them all to be in simple mode, you could turn around and make model in simple mode, and then any new database created would also be in simple mode if they created it with SSMS or some other way and didn't create it through here. This will create a brand new database for you. So if you've never had a database on the system at all, it'll go create the database totally for you. So let's go look at here and see exactly how, I believe I've got some published profiles here. You'll notice that I've got a dev published profile, and if I check the dev published profile, it'll bring up everything about the server and have everything already set for me. When I'm deploying to a non-dev environment, this would be changed to, like, say, for example, QA1, QA2, UAT1, UAT2, prod, whatever the case you want that setting to, and then you would go in and use that. Now, where is that important, and why is this setting important to be set that way? It's because of our security. Remember I told you about security? So let's go ahead and close this, and let's go look at security now. And when I'm looking at security, and I look at the database here, and I go to scripts, and this is all going to be shown to you. There's going to be a new security admin. Now, first of all, you're going to have to add your scripts up here to post deployment. You're going to have to add for security logins. You're going to have all your logins, all your server logins. So whatever your logins may be, there's one of our server logins. So what we would do is we're going to basically say, check and see if the account exists. Remember, always make it to where it's repeatable. Check and see if the account exists. If the account doesn't exist, go ahead and create it on this server. So then it would go create it. Now the question boils down to, you might have some of these that would turn around and be, I only want that account, for example, to possibly be in prod only. Well, what you're going to see is here's all the prod accounts that get sent in. There's server roles, database permissions, and then possibly database roles like RS exec role for reporting services if you need it. So you have all these different ways. If we look at QA, it would be a different subset. Dev would be even a different subset. Now mine, they look all the same because I'm all on one server, but technically they would all be in a different subset there. So so you have to start out always deploying your master database just like you would any other place. You've got to put your logins first before you put your usernames. And then once you have that, then you come down here to your database users, and you would add in your database users for whatever they may be. So you come up here to say you want DBO role, and if you look at DBO role, then you're going to make sure that it's a database principal, see if it exists, make sure and see if it exists on the server. It's at the server level, and then you would go ahead and create the user for the login that you want. And of course, this is AD. You could do SQL Auth also if you wanted to do that. And then once you do that, you very well may come in here, for example, and you would go in here and go, okay, now I need to connect that particular login. I need to connect him to to allow him to connect into the database. And then this is where you go assign them the role that you want them to be in. Now, in this particular case, he's going to be database owner. Now, we have these different roles, read-only, read-write, DBO, so I can take vacations. Or I can get other work done, and I let my sysadmins, Windows sysadmins, put people into accounts depending upon the approval levels that they had in escalation process in production if they need to, for example, read the database for troubleshooting or whatever. So you've got all these different accounts again to where you put them in. And then you also have possibly that you can grant alter to any column master key, for example, for always encrypted, or they need to view the column encryption key, or whatever other privileges that the account might need. And then once you set these up, then what you're doing, when we saw that environmental variable that we set up, here it is. We're basically saying, okay, in this environment, if I pass in prod, I'm going to run the prod script. If I pass in UAT, I'm going to run the UAT script. If I pass in QA, and etc. So if you have multiple environments and the security is not the same, like for example, for service accounts, probably would not be the same. You might have a QA 1, 2, 3, you might have a UAT 1, 2, 3, whatever the case may be, and you would just set your security up accordingly so that you have it, and then you would deploy your security the way you want it. You'll notice the security set up here that is passing in the environment that we have there. Here's another one, pass in whatever environment, and looks like I basically did again a copy paste, but basically you get the ordeal is basically that we have all those types of things. So that is how you set up security, and like I said, that PowerShell script will definitely help you get in there and do the things that you need to do. So take advantage of that and work at that and show what we have to do. Now let's take a look and let's close all these windows. We got several open, so let's close all windows. And now let's go and look at jobs. Let's see how to do jobs and other objects. So when we look at jobs, you got the publish profile again, scripts, and your post-deployment. Now your post-deployment, you will have a script here that basically says go deploy these objects. So you'll notice it's deploying some operators, some mail, some job history for table security. Here's some store procedure security, some alerts that it's loading, database mail. The nice thing about it is all my servers have the exact same thing in here. So that makes it really nice. So you can see all the different things that we turn around and actually deploy. So let's take a look at our jobs here. And here's the job template that guy gives to you. So here's how we use that environment that we were talking about. So if the environment equals prod, then maybe we'll return and get out and not even load the store procedure or load finance or monitoring. Or the other way we can handle it, if it's prod, then change the owner to this or change the owner to that, and then turn around and set your setting appropriately and stuff. So, and then you would go in here and add in the information. You might have it check the secondary to see if you want the job even to run or not. and then you go ahead and deploy the job to the environment that you want. So that is the way that you go in and actually create a job. And if you look at, I'm going to look at the audit that I created. So you'll notice that basically it says, here's the name of my owner of my account. And then I'm going to say if it's not obfuscation or the monitor server, go ahead and load up this particular job. I want you to go ahead and put the audit access, SQL audit access on all computers, Dev, QA, UAT, and Prod. And that's the thing is we're deploying encryption, we're deploying audits, we're deploying everything to every single environment. But what we may not do when we do that is and you see some PowerShell being actually deployed there, is we may not schedule the job. So the job may be on someone's server. That way I can run it if I really need to run it right quick on a server. I didn't think I needed it there, but if it's deployed, you can turn around and say, go ahead and do it, go ahead and actually execute it. And you can notice here that the only environment where it's actually scheduled is going to be production. It's not scheduled in our UAT, QA, and development environments. It's there, so we can actually use it, but it doesn't mean that we actually have to. So that is the way that we go in and actually go create these items to where you can go put those things in. But notice that you've got all kinds of information here. And you can add data into the script. You can hit return. Let's see if I've got any in my database down here to where I'm populating some scripts. I think I do. So if I come down here to this area, we'll get out of security. Go back down here. Here's a stored procedure just for obfuscation to obfuscate data. And I do not have it there, but let me go back up here. I do believe I have it here. Here's where I deploy all the Hologren scripts out to my server. But there is like the populate, like I was saying, there's the populate for the table. Here's might be a populate to populate the information for the audit table to make sure it's running at different accounts in different environments. So with that said, we're going to start kind of wrapping this up today and give you an opportunity to ask questions here. We definitely want to thank you for coming by. We want to have you go ahead and create the session evaluations that are available, and please do that. Let me get that started here. Slideshow from current slide. There we go. So if you would go ahead and create the session evaluations, I appreciate you coming by today, and be sure and submit before Friday, and you could possibly win a prize there, and that would be very cool. And if you need to contact me, there's my email, there's my Twitter account. Thank you, and thanks for coming to PASS Virtual Summit 2020. Have a great day.